I do think with podcasting specifically, authenticity has been so important. So not speaking up about something you believe in could also hurt you.
True.
So there's kind of like this weird catch-22 where it's like, do I or do I not share what my political beliefs are? And if I share, am I going to be canceled?
Welcome to Podcast Coaching with Christine. Here we talk about how to grow your podcast using industry insights and broadcasting strategies.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Coaching with Christine. Thank you guys so much for being here. On this week's episode, we are going to talk about whether or not you should stay politically neutral in your podcast. Can this help you? Can this hurt you? We'll be speaking with TV news reporter and political reporter Steve Kuzj, who is also my husband, about this. And we're going to dive into these questions. Will you lose followers if you share your political beliefs and opinion? Will you alienate your audience? Will you lose sales? Is there a guide to talking about taboo subjects on podcasts? Well, that is what myself and TV news reporter and political reporter Steve Kuzj are going to be talking about on this episode. We dive into the pros and cons of revealing your political affiliation publicly. We talk about cancel culture and how to navigate the murkiness that is the wild, wild web. But before we dive into that interview, I do want to say thank you to any new listeners out there. If you are just joining this podcast, if you're just getting to know me and everything here, here's a little background. My name is Christine O'Donnell. I was a TV news reporter for over a decade, working in stations across the country from Los Angeles to New York to Boston. And I took a little detour into marketing. And through my time working in a marketing company, I found podcasting and I started producing podcasts on behalf of other experts and influencers. And one of my first podcasts blew up going into, the top 5% of podcasts worldwide, topping the charts in just the first 5 months, which is a huge endeavor. And so since then, I have been teaching other people how to make that happen for themselves. If you'd like to find out more information on that, you can go to christine-o'donnell.com. And if you want to check out other episodes of this podcast, some of the ones that are really great, and I'll put links to them in the show notes, we talk about how to maximize your SEO so you get more downloads. We talk about how to scale your podcast by getting PR for yourself and creating your own PR kit. We also talk about how to go viral and can you do that with a podcast? So if you're looking for more information, be sure to check out past seasons of my show. This is the last episode of season 4 of Podcast Coaching with Christine. And if you're just getting started, I'm also going to share a link to my 15-step podcast launch checklist. So if you're thinking just now of launching your podcast and you're like, where do I start? How do I do this? I have a 15-step checklist for you. So I'm going to leave that in the show notes as well. I hope you find all of this super helpful. And thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad you're here with me. And if you're just joining us now, please check out past episodes. All right. Without further ado, let's dive into this week's interview. You guys, TV news reporter Steve Kuzj, who has also got a specialty in politics and political reporting, here with me in the studio. And we are going to talk about whether or not you should stay politically neutral in your podcast. So if these are some of the questions that you have been asking yourself this week, especially with the election that just happened, the inauguration of Joe Biden, perhaps you've been wondering, should I share my political views when I am talking on my podcast? And here are some of the questions that you may have been asking yourself. Like, for example, will you lose followers if you share your political beliefs and opinion? Will you alienate your audience? Will you lose sales? Is there a guide to talking about taboo subjects on podcasts? Well, thankfully, again, I have TV news and political reporter Steve Kuzj here today to talk about the pros and cons of revealing your political affiliation publicly. We're going to talk about cancel culture, and how to navigate the murkiness that is the wild, wild web.
It's very murky sometimes.
It can be. Thanks for being here, Steve.
I'm happy to be here. I think I am especially qualified to talk about this kind of topic because, first and foremost, as a television news reporter, I've spent more than a decade being told, do not go there, do not say this, kind of stick to this angle and stay neutral. Neutral. I know that might shock a lot of people that news reporters and journalists are supposed to be unbiased and neutral, but that's actually the truth.
Well, you go to school for it.
We do go to school for it.
Learn how to be objective, and then you practice being objective. I think that neutrality, I mean, what do you think about this? Like, I was a news reporter for a while as well. And to me, this was something where I would put on a hat and wear my neutrality hat and be objective with every interview, with every conversation. And when I was reporting the news, I would keep wearing that hat. Like, that never came off.
Right.
And it's something like a muscle you have to keep working.
And I think you had a particularly interesting experience with that, trying to stay neutral, or not just staying neutral, but trying to convince other people that you were neutral, because the last big station you worked for was Fox, the local Fox station here in Los Angeles. And obviously that comes with a lot of connotations that people think, Fox News Channel is very conservative leaning. So you working for a local Fox station, you must be, a hardcore Republican, right?
I would say for the years that I was working as a TV news reporter, I was as independent as you can be. I remember there was one time I was reporting on a Trump rally when he was running for election. And something that frustrated me as a reporter is I remember him declaring while he was on we were airing him live, and he was declaring that X number of people were there to watch him at this rally. Like
10 or 20,000, right?
Yes, or something like that. But the fire code for the stadium that we were in was significantly less than what he was saying. But while he was saying, 16,000 people showed up for me here today at this rally here in Anaheim, and do you think the dishonest media is going to report on that? And I remember feeling, kind of attacked, because it did incite the crowd, and the crowd, we had to have security keep the crowd from jumping into the pool of where the journalists were. I remember it because it was my birthday, so it's specifically in my mind as a day.
Happy birthday!
That I remember people coming at me. But it's so interesting. I remember being as objective as possible and feeling kind of stuck in a weird spot where it's how do I report the truth right now when this person who is running for office is calling me dishonest while saying something dishonest. So it's almost like he's putting me back into a corner where almost anything I say, people may not believe, because people are believing what he is saying, and he is calling me dishonest, even though fire code says this.
I think everyone who's worked in the media, especially even on the conservative side, would agree that President Trump threw all of the whole media empire a big curveball, no matter what political affiliation you are, what station you worked for. I think something important to clear up right now for everyone is that local news stations, believe it or not, are basically politically neutral. We go in every day. We're supposed to just shoot straight, not lean liberal, not lean conservative whatsoever. Again, because we don't want to turn off any of our viewers, no matter where we are. And again, we've worked in Georgia, Arizona, two very conservative states. And I can tell you the stations I worked for, we did not lean conservative. We had to just tell the truth, stick to the facts, and not interject with any of our opinions. Now, if you get to an MSNBC or a Fox News channel, or, OANN,
national
Newsmax,
affiliate.
some of the big cable network stations, and it's most of the cable network stations. They, have the political hosts and commentators, and they get more editorialized than, say, your local CBS station. Even the national, like, CBS News with Deborah O'Donnell, Nora O'Donnell, excuse me. That's your mom.
Then my stepmom.
Like Nora O'Donnell, or some of the others you might watch. Robin Robbins on Good Morning America. They're neutral. They're not going to be exposing their opinions left and right. You might see some stories that might lean a little more one way than the other, but it's not quite as significant as you would see on MSNBC or Fox News channel, and especially not as significant as, not nearly anything you would see like with local news stations, which are very unbiased.
Say hyper objective.
Yeah, and I think if you just kind of break it down and watch your local station and kind of think about it, you might say, oh yeah, that's not like watching Sean Hannity or, on the other end, Rachel Maddow. It's very different.
Yes, I would agree with you. And today on the podcast, we want to talk about, if you're an independent podcaster, what you should be doing, how you should act right now, what kind of things you should say, what this means for you, and just kind of the pros and cons, because I do think that podcasting, like so many different marketing tools, because a podcast, not only is it a way for people to share stories with each other, it also is a marketing tool that a lot of businesses use to sell their products. And there's a lot of ads that are out there, specifically in podcasts. I mean, the number for 2021, the sales is $2 billion in ad sales from podcast revenue or podcast ad revenue and ad revenue in audiobooks as well. So there is an appetite for this kind of content. And so you also have to think like, oh, if there's ads in this, what does that mean? What does this mean for me as a podcaster, as an independent podcaster? And
because the last thing you'd want to do is offend your advertisers, right? The people who could potentially be paying your bills and all that.
Or your audiences. But
especially the audience, because if you lose the audience, then all of a sudden you're going to lose those advertisers.
Yeah. But I do think with podcasting specifically, authenticity has been so important. So not speaking up about something you believe in could also hurt you.
True.
So there's kind of like this weird catch-22 where it's like, do I or do I not share what my political beliefs are? And if I share, am I going to be canceled?
Right.
And, or like, for example, I have a great example of this. And, for those who don't know, Steve and I are also married. We have a child together.
What?
We actually have two of them.
And wait, show it now. There.
Oh, well, she's sleeping.
She is sleeping.
And you can barely see her head.
You can see part of her head.
But this is a podcast. It's not a video cast.
Unless you want to.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's not focused.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There's a child there. We have two of them, and
watch the online YouTube version of this for the behind the scenes stuff you can't see on a podcast.
That is true. So specifically, we follow a lot of people, or at least I follow a lot of influencers that are in the parenting world, in podcasting and in social media, specifically Instagram. You can find me at the Christine OD if you want to check out our Instagram page, or my Instagram page, but our kids are there. There is a Instagram influencer. She is an expert at what she does. She helps people train their kids to sleep so that they can also, like, parents can get sleep, right? Because it's one thing that parents lack. Sleep.
She's like a mommy blogger then.
Yeah, she's a mommy influencer. She has courses out there that train parents how to train their kids to sleep through the night so that parents get sleep through the night.
That sounds very useful.
Yes, there are so many people have taken her course. She had over 1 million followers, well over 1 million. And after this most recent election, people found out that she had donated to the Trump campaign.
His re-election campaign. Huh?
Yes. And she has since been targeted by online bullies, People have been calling her racist. People are saying that she doesn't care about babies or kids. It's been really ugly towards her. And I'm not trying to be ugly towards her. I'm just giving her as an example
Right.
Of someone. So she has never shared her political beliefs, but
all of a sudden
people like went in and looked at all the people who had donated to the Trump reelection campaign. And she, between the years of 2016 to 2019, donated $1,078 to Trump's reelection campaign.
Not like a huge amount of money, but I mean, it's more than I think I've ever given to any political candidate, but I'm sure less than other people have
that's because you're a
given
journalist.
Oh, right. But I'm sure there's some people who donate too, who work in our industry, or just anyone who likes to be politically involved. I'm sure our neighbors have donated.
It could have
quite a
been
bit.
her significant other. Like, you don't necessarily control everybody in your household.
I
feel like I know this like at a very personal level. Like my family, if you really dig deep, you'll see. Not just here in our household, but anyway, beyond.
Well, I think you touched on something really importantly, if I can mention it. She wasn't even talking about her political beliefs on her podcast. This is just people who they found out that she did support the president and donated her own money that she'd earned, potentially even through her podcast, to the president's reelection campaign. And even though she wasn't telling people her political opinions, people found out that she supported President Trump, and then they automatically started targeting her with all the negative things someone might say about President Trump. Oh, they want to lock kids up, in cages at the border. Oh, Trump's a misogynist, and you must not care about women yourself, and probably taking all those other negative things against, whoever she supported, and then just putting them on her, despite her never even talking about that.
Yeah, she didn't talk about it. She didn't disclose it, but people found out. And I mean, this was on GMA the other morning, this story. So this isn't like, you don't have to go deep to find what we're talking about. And I mean, her Instagram handle is Taking Care of Babies. And she shares a lot of really valuable stuff on there. And I don't want people to like go from here to there and just like hate on her. But this is just something we definitely have to be aware of, because what are the standards? And can you be canceled if people, one, find out about your political beliefs, or find out if you've donated to a political affiliation? Gosh, I feel like I had so many conversations, especially over the holidays, about I didn't vote the man, I voted the party. That's like
sure.
And I just feel like this can be really,
it's touchy, especially with family. I mean, there's a reason why people tell you not to talk politics with your family. And I guess there's probably a big reason you might not want to talk politics at your job, or especially on your podcast with supporters who you might not know which way they lean or how they'll feel. Just like you may not know how your uncle feels about a certain thing.
So do you or don't you? What are the pros? What are the pros to sharing your political beliefs?
I mean, it really depends, I think, on what kind of a podcast you have. I mean, are you, say, a mommy blogger? Are you a food wine expert? Are you a movie reviewer? Or do you have a political podcast, obviously? Or are you kind of like a radio DJ shock jock kind of person who wants to just crack wise with a bunch of his friends? I'd say there are exceptions to the rule. I'd say most people, is that your brand? Is talking politics or religion or other potentially, maybe not offensive, but sensitive topics, is that your brand? Would that help your brand? I think you got to ask yourself, if I talk about this, how is this going to help me in the long run? Could this be misinterpreted, no matter what I say, by my followers? And there are people who obviously make a living, and we're very well living on podcasts, by just shouting their opinion and being as loud and sometimes as inappropriate as possible. I'd say, look at Joe Rogan. He's not afraid to say whatever he wants. That's why millions of people watch and listen to him. They want to know, what does Joe think about this? He's authentic. And again, authenticity is so important. But again, that is his show. People already know kind of which way he leans. They know he can be offensive and crude and inappropriate, and that's why they're tuning in to him. So if he says something like, oh, I gave this money to President Trump, or, oh, I'm not sure about, what Biden's going to do on this, or, oh, whatever he says, he's probably not going to lose a lot of followers or even gain followers either way. People already go to him because they know what to expect. However, if you're that kind of, local, wholesome, person that teaches people how to bake really delicious, snacks for holidays or for their friends or for birthday cakes and all that, that could be a surprise to people if all of a sudden, you start talking about, your faith in God, or, when you go to temple on Saturdays, if you're Jewish, or, whatever, you're getting into something that people aren't expecting, and you may inadvertently turn a lot of people off. Not to mention if you've got advertisers who might be saying, whoa, I don't think we want to have our baking powder product related with your baking show anymore. If you're going to be talking about, how much, you love the Democrat Party, it's maybe that's not the right place for that advertiser, and you work so hard to get those advertisers. So I'd say you got to be very careful about this kind of stuff while still staying, authentic to who you are. And that's my take as a TV journalist who has to be so careful every day not to offend people one way or the other. And I've had people, in the same day say, oh, you're just lamestream liberal media, or, you're so, conservative and, right wing, and we can't trust you. You're an imperial capitalist. And it's like, what? Okay, so where am I? I'm none of those things. I feel like I'm very in the center and just honest with people, and not trying to lean any direction. But at the end of the day, I get accused for all of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that means, if you're not making anybody happy, you're doing a good job.
You're not making anyone happy. It might be time to hang it up and quit and, I don't know, try something else.
I do want to, I try not to move away from the microphone, so I'm going to just set this on your lap. Okay.
Hot.
Is it too hot?
Okay.
Okay. I just put my laptop on Steve's lap.
Okay.
That's what it's for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was looking up some studies about this just to kind of dive in. And Clemson University and Drexel University have been doing a study about taking a stand, consumer responses when companies, or let's say podcasts, get political. And something that is mentioned here is that it may actually be more dangerous to stay silent than to take a public stand.
Interesting.
Based on the difference between exchange relationships and communal relationships that you have with your audience.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive in a little bit more there. So companies have reflexively, usually abstained from taking public stances on all controversial issues. Let's say the death penalty,
abortion,
yes, immigration.
However, gun rights, sure.
Yeah, in recent years, some companies have decided to go against traditional wisdom and share where they stand. So what does this mean? The difference here is for some companies, it could be hypocritical for them not to share because of the type of company that they are. So, if there's a company out there that claims to adapt to its environment in pursuit of performance, say, like a market-driven intended image. And I feel like I can think of some examples featuring maybe the Jenners in a Pepsi commercial.
Oh,
do you remember
one of the Kardashian
Jenners
spin-off sisters?
Yeah, and so I think it was
Pepsi. It was
where they tried
Kendall Jenner
to
break up a race-related an anti-police violence protest with police in there. And what is it? Kendall Jenner comes in through the crowd and offers an officer wearing full body armor and riot gear a Pepsi. And all of a sudden, all the the angst and tension, and rioting stops and people drink Pepsi together and all happy, because that's what it takes. That's how you stop rioting and racial injustice in its tracks. You
So
drink a
Pepsi pulled
Pepsi.
this commercial, and Jenner ended up apologizing.
Was it a Super Bowl commercial?
I
think it was a Super Bowl
I
commercial.
can't remember. It was so long ago, but that's like, for me, an example of a company trying to adapt to the environment to sell a product. And that's one of the reasons it had to be taken down. We got so much backlash. I think like Peloton recently got a bunch of backlash.
Well, that's
because of that, like,
well,
weight loss.
Yeah, it was a weight loss backlash, because the woman who got the Peloton was like, my husband got me this because he wants me to be better, and I'm scared, I don't know about this. And then she looked like she was being forced into having to lose weight with a Peloton. And then Ryan Reynolds found that actress and made her do like a drinking commercial.
Offered her,
yeah.
So,
well, she gladly accepted.
And anyway, like those are just kind of, I think, some examples of companies getting it wrong and deciding, oh, I feel like this is what we should do because this is what society likes right now. This is one of Steve's favorite words, guys, zeitgeist.
I used it once in a news report, and people were like, whoa, you're bringing out the expensive words. That's it's like a $5 word there, Mr. Kuzj.
So the cultural,
the feeling of the time.
The feeling of the time. And so if you're not a company, you really got to be aware of what you're doing and what you're saying, because, and I think those are examples of companies who got it wrong and then had to make changes. And they have, and I believe both of those companies are doing okay.
On the flip side, though, as we were kind of alluding to, in the run-up to this big, 2020 presidential election, there was actually a lot of demand from not just companies, but from, the fans and supporters of various influencers and social media stars, for them to speak out about their political beliefs. And I think, that really just, the ones who are being called out the most, I think probably had, a strong following of supporters who either, were either Trump supporters or Biden supporters. And I think their audiences wanted to know, hey, we look to you every day for fun and entertainment, but with something so important like a presidential election, now more than ever, we want to know, where do you stand on this issue? Which candidate do you support? Are you this person who, we really feel like, we can connect with, and you're our friend who we just never met, but you're on social media, so we feel like we know you. We need to know this about you. And that's it's a very difficult kind of task to navigate. I think you really need to know who your audience is. And if you are going to, tell people, I voted this way, or I think you should vote this way on anything, you need to know where your audience stands, so you're not in for a big shock when all of a sudden, you tell people whatever belief you have or who you voted for, and all of a sudden your comments are just horrible, just vile, people trashing you about one thing or another. And even if people do support you, either way, you're probably going to get some backlash from folks who don't see eye to eye with you.
And you are talking actually about the other example here, like the opposite side of the coin, which is companies, or let's say podcasters, who claim to stay true to a set of internally held values, and those values perpetuate their image, and that's what connects them to their audience and their consumers. So if they do not share their political beliefs or their opinion, then they're going to be called hypocritical. And there also is, like, if you're going to be putting yourself out there in front of a microphone or in front of a camera, you open yourself up to backlash, no matter what. Like, you're never going to make everybody happy.
You can't avoid it.
Honestly, many people don't feel like you're successful until you've got like a number of 1-star podcast reviews. So kind of keep that in mind as you navigate these waters. But my personal opinion is authenticity is super important. So if you have built a brand around your value, and your value is like super liberal, or you're, that's what you've built your identity based on, or if it's not, then you don't really have to share. It just kind of depends. There are pros and cons.
That's funny.
And you have to be okay losing followers.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with having less sales. Like
Right.
if you're your own business, if your own podcast and you don't have any advertisers, you just have to be aware, like, hey, if I share my beliefs, if I share my opinion on this, people are going to leave. People are going to hate me. People are going to say mean things.
Sure. And on the flip side of the coin,
and embrace it maybe.
Yeah, you might have some people who do embrace you even more and share you with their friends who've got similar beliefs as them. So the followers you lose, you could make up for in gains. Again, it's all very tricky. So before you start, spouting off, opinions that might not be related to your brand, know your audience. Maybe find a way to, test your audience, send them out, some feeler forms, kind of figure out where they are.
Yes. I mean, I would say that's the case for any podcast. You should constantly be surveying your audience and ask them what they're into or not into. So if you're listening to us today, let us know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why
what
people
you do like and what you don't like about, podcast coaching with Christine. And if this is a helpful episode for you, let me know. Let us know. I think that for like the takeaways would be, it depends. Do you share your political beliefs?
Is it your brand?
Is it your brand? Go ahead.
Is it not your brand? I think that's one of the big main takeaways. I think the most important thing is, if you really want to have a show where, you feel free to unleash your opinion about whatever, whenever, especially if that's, politics or religion or any of the above, start that podcast. Start a separate podcast apart from your, podcast about, video games or, pop culture. Start that podcast about, scandalous things that, or trying to be offensive to other people. Start that one if you want. But just make sure the other audience, people who follow you on your other show don't find out about it.
Well,
if it's really, if it's really a little, pushing the boundaries.
And podcasts do push the boundaries. That's one of the things that is really exciting about them. And I think people love is that podcasts, there's a voice for everything. Like there is something for everyone out there, and you'll find it for you. Your audience will find it for them.
Right.
And ultimately, my feeling is, if you can sleep at night, right? If you're not talking about it doesn't bother you, then great. But if you feel like inside that you need to take a stand and say, this is who I voted for and this is why, because it like personally fuels you, you have to be okay with losing followers. You have to be okay with possibly losing sales, with maybe making people angry. And if you can still sleep at night because you stuck true to who you are and what you believe and like the very core of you, gosh, I am all for that. Like I lean into that. Just make sure that you feel like you can sleep at night.
Right. And then of course, if you're that person who right now is, focused on building their podcast, growing, their listeners and their big base, you got to ask yourself, what does my audience want? I mean, you know that better than anyone, Christine. When it comes to building the podcast, it's all about serving your audience best and giving them, what they want. So they keep sharing the podcast, so they keep coming back to yours, listening and, being happy with it. And, if you're going to be talking about something that could offend somebody, is that, that's obviously what some people in your audience are not going to want, or others could want. There's a big asterisk to all of it. So just make sure you think about it thoroughly. You'd hate for it to just be, you're interviewing a guest on your show and all of a sudden, one guest you have kind of says something semi-political and then you just go into a big rant, kind of get off topic about whatever it is you were speaking about. And then, you get back on course and that little part in your podcast just kind of stands out from the rest of the message and you put it out there and people hear it and they say, whoa. This wasn't, the podcast on, baking muffins that I thought it was going to be, on. All of a sudden, you put this whole, political ideal out there that I don't agree with. And where did that come from? Why?
And so I do want to mention, like, noticeably, right? Like, noticeably in this show right now, like, we're not sharing our political stance. And
you'll never find out. It's complicated.
and that's like my personal, like, I personally see like how people can have like strong opinions on both sides of the coin. I can say like, hey, I am pro-choice. I do not think it's okay that children are caged in the border right now. Like, that's something that keeps me up at night. And I'm hoping that Biden makes a change there and is able to, gosh, reunite these kids with their families. I have been really frustrated with race relations in our country and the kind of white supremacy that has been happening lately, and has been fueled by the past administration. But I am not saying that people who voted for Trump are like all in agreement there on the like, I don't believe that. And so like, I have like friends and family and loved ones on both sides of this equation, and I'm constantly trying to figure out like, how can we come together and what are the things that we all care about. And so that is why I personally am not like that's what I will share with you. And I'm not going to put Steve on the spot because he's a journalist.
And I'm a hardcore communist. Shh. Strike that from the record. No, I'm not. I'm kidding.
Oh gosh. Okay. So thank you guys for listening. Let me know if you feel this is a helpful episode to you. Is there anything else you want to share, Stephen?
I mean, this is a sensitive subject, and I don't think, of course, we have all the answers for everybody. It comes down to how do you feel individually? As you said, can I sleep at night if I'm not telling people how I feel on the inside about, something near and dear to your heart? You got to weigh the pros and the cons. So I would say if you do want to, get political, make a list. Make a list of how you think it could help you or not help you. Make sure you know your audience. And again, most importantly, stay authentic to who you are, to who your brand is, and to, the people who your audience wants.
Yeah. And don't feel like you're forced to do something. You're not like, don't feel backed into a wall. Like, you don't have to share, or you don't I feel like there is just, don't feel forced. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. It does. I feel like, again, as we were just talking, there were so many influencers and social media stars and even celebrities who felt a push from their followers and fans to know, where these influencers and celebrities stood on very sensitive and controversial political lines.
Ooh, Chris Pratt.
Yeah, Chris Pratt. People found out that, he, was Republican. And it's not a crime, but all of a sudden, all these hashtags are popping up about how, Chris Pratt is everyone's least favorite Chris out of the Chris Evans and the other, who's the other favorite Chris?
I can't remember.
Chris Evans, Chris Pratt, Chris. The one from Star Trek. They're all very nice, successful, good-looking Chris's.
What did Schwarzenegger run as?
He was Republican, a Republican governor of California, the governor.
And he was married to a Kennedy, who ran it. So it's there's all this blurriness.
Yeah. But he was, I think that was back at a time when things weren't as polarized.
Yeah.
He was very, I would say, moderate, and probably would be considered liberal for his stances that he took as a Republican back when he ran. Yeah,
because him and Trump totally butted heads.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very confusing.
Yeah,
we're getting convoluted now.
And it's again, it's messy, as you can see how, we even try to talk about it, and it's confusing, and, passions run high because, all of a sudden you say, you support one thing, and all these negative connotations with that one thing come flooding in based on, the heated rhetoric that we've had building up in this country for years. I don't know if just the last 4 years since, Trump was elected, or even if it started before that with Obama or the Bushes, or, maybe that's just the history of the United States of America. Politics are always that sensitive issue that you're not supposed to talk about, at the Thanksgiving dinner table.
I think that we can all, my goal always was as a journalist was try to understand both sides of the equation. And
Right.
I think I just still have that in my mind, is to really try to understand everyone and come together on the things that bring us together.
Sure.
And
yeah,
I would love for us all to become a little bit more united.
Yeah. And again, if you are going to put your opinions out there, be open to the fact that people are not going to agree with you. It's not going to happen. I know 100% you are going to feel that you are right. I know I feel I'm right on some things. I know Christine feels she's right on some things, and we do not agree on that. And we agree on that she is always right. But, go into that with the understanding that, you're not going to see eye to eye with, certain people, or even your followers sometimes, if you're going to get opinionated and political or religious. And don't be shocked if it happens. Maybe embrace it. Maybe reach out to some of those followers or those people who leave you negative reviews or messages to find out, why they feel that way. And if you have a better understanding of it, maybe that would help, you and your audience and, your podcast and your brand be even stronger in the end. You have a little bit of a fight and you come together and you come back together and have a big makeup.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Steve, for being on this episode with me today.
I had a lot on my schedule, a lot on my plate. I had to clear off to make time for this.
I'm very appreciative. Thank you, Steve. And if people want to find you or hear more about you and what you do, where can they do that?
I always want to mislead people here and go to this scandalous website. Just throw it off just go to blah, 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 blah. And people click, what is this? No.
You can find him on social media. On Instagram.
Just type in Steve Kuzj. That's Kuzj. It's just, I'm the only Steve Kuzj out there that really pops up on social media. So
except for his dad.
Well, he's not on social media.
He's on Facebook.
And I am not affiliated with his views. Do not think that.
Oh my word. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. And this is actually the end of season 4 of Podcast Coaching with Christine. So if you have missed past episodes and you want to find out more about this show, some of the other episodes from our past seasons, they're all in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, wherever you look at podcasts. 10 episodes a season. And my episodes have covered, how to grow your podcast with public relations, how to get those public relations, how to go viral was a conversation I had with Laura Cathcart-Robbins. We cover SEO. We've covered, how to hack your analytics. So there's a lot of good stuff in this podcast. So if you haven't gone through and looked through some of the episodes to find what's right for you in your podcasting journey, please do. And even if I'm not recording a season or an episode at the time, I still will get your feedback. And I look forward to, to responding. Until then, you can always find me on Instagram at @TheChristineOD.
I gotta say, I feel honored. I'm the guy to cap off season 4. This is leaving on a high note, Christine. Wow.
I hope so.
Wow. And kind of a cliffhanger too, because people are going to be having all these extra questions, I think, after listening to this episode. So maybe next season we do the episode of, so you got political and opinionated on your podcast and sparked a huge scandal. What do you do now? That's an episode for another time that you will help guide your audience through, I'm sure.
On that note, Steve Kuzj.
Signing off. Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find this podcast on Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and more. If you would like to email me directly, feel free to reach out at podcastcoachchristine@gmail.com. And of course, you can head to my website, christine-o'donnell.com, for frequently asked questions, the latest on what's going on in the industry, and I look forward to seeing you over there.